Get started. So everybody, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. This is the first CDF quarterly meeting of 2021. We initially started this group on LinkedIn. It was functioning more as a bulletin board, but we definitely wanted to start engaging more with the members of this group. So we thought we'd start these quarterly meetings. Just a quick agenda. An intro to the CDF. I think most folks on the call know this, so I'll just quickly walk through those, and then we'll dive into the speaker panel with Tara, Jane, and Zainab. The topic today is going to be how to level up your DevOps career. Then we'll break out into smaller groups and have a discussion, and then we'll come back for Q&A and do a quick wrap up. So I think most of you know the CDF's mission is to help the other organizations deliver software with security and speed. And our purpose is to help establish best practices, propel education and adoption of continuous delivery tools, and also help facilitate that cross-pollination in the community. So we are led by a team of accomplished professionals passionate about delivering beautiful software swiftly and simply. And we're trying to do this by growing a user-first collaborative ecosystem. We're trying to serve as a neutral home for new and mature projects that are dedicated to the CD model. We're trying to create a cohesive body of educational materials for practitioners of all levels. And we're also trying to govern with fairness, integrity, and intention. These are our founding and incubating projects. And this is our leadership team as well. So if you need to get in touch with us, here are some resources. And now to our main topic on how to level up your DevOps career. So we're going to start out with a segment called My DevOps Journey. I kind of pulled it from The Pipeline, which is our podcast. And this is where we get to learn about our speaker's DevOps journey. So Tara, I'll start with you. Can you share with us what your DevOps journey was like?
Yeah, sure. It really started long before DevOps was a thing. I mean, DevOps as a term was coined. I think we've all agreed that it was around 2009 when folks had to organize a conference and needed to name it around what are the best practices around continuous integration evolving into continuous delivery. When I was at Netscape back in the mid 90s, we had already seen the need for some of these principles in action. And a lot of companies were starting to understand this concept of how do you enable developer productivity, efficiency? How do you basically adapt to internet time, which was a new term that was evolving, going from these older models of shrink wrap software that you would go to the store and purchase, and having physical media. There would be anywhere from 18-month to 3-year development lifecycle, to now there's an increasingly a predomination of people just downloading stuff from FTP servers. And that really was sort of a fundamental change in approach and caused, I think, all of the industry at the time to sort of mad scramble to try and figure out what is the next thing to do. And one of the cool things that we did at Netscape was we did develop tools. And then as part of the creation of Mozilla.org, we open sourced some of those tools, and they ended up being kind of an early foray into Netscape, not only sharing browser code and making that be widely available, but development process and how to approach what is the tooling that you need, what are the procedures that you need in order to support, in that case, multiple platforms. That, the Linux hadn't really hit yet as sort of the predominant Unix variant. Windows and Mac were already prevalent. So that was kind of the main thing, is how do we make sure that the browser works on as many different computers and operating systems as possible. And that was, we created a tool called Tinderbox that was an early continuous integration tool. We also, I think, released the first what we would now call open source bug tracking tool called Bugzilla. That tool is remarkably still running around. There's still a couple thousand instances of it, which just cracks me up. I wrote a lot of really bad Perl code back in the early days of Bugzilla. So it was really kind of, I think, validating for those of us who were dedicated to the ideas of development process and development infrastructure to see the industry actually adopt that as something that was important. And now there are companies, that GitHub, CloudBees, for example, that's all they do is they do development process and infrastructure. And so I think it's, for me, it's the validation of that DevOps has evolved as a concept, as an industry standard, and now a measurable kind of practice that you can have for how software development happens, the art of it, if you will. So anyway, yeah, so I've been around a long time as a foot soldier in this ongoing challenge, but it's been super fun, and now I'm getting to work at Google, for example, on these types of tools and still trying to kind of help the industry evolve. And then of course with the CD Foundation, it's like, wow, we're actually, having industry-wide discussions about this stuff. So to me, I feel giddy that it took a long time, but we're finally at this point. So there you go. That's my story.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And Jane, what about yourself? What was your DevOps journey like?
My story is probably a little different than my co-panelists today. So I'm an accidental technologist, and Tara, you said you're a foot soldier from earlier. I bet you I beat you by about 10 years in terms of the technology space. So I have a bachelor's degree in music. And so when I got out of college, there just weren't any jobs under M in the New York Times, right? That said, hey, music majors, here you go, right? And so I ended up becoming a paralegal for quite a few years, and ended up at a Wall Street law firm that had taken on Unix way before Unix was a commercially available operating system. And so everyone had to learn Unix. I mean, we were writing legal documents in VI. And so regardless of whatever role you had, you actually had to develop some Unix capabilities. And I guess I was pretty good at it. And the executive director eventually moved me into IT, mostly because the developers really didn't want to deal with the users. And so I was technical enough, right, to start their, what was called the hotline at the time, ultimately their help desk and their training environment. And I kind of launched my technical career from there. And then you fast forward, and I had a really good opportunity to stay in IT management and look at it more from a leadership process perspective, framework perspective. I was a director of IT for a fairly large nonprofit for a while. I worked in the hospitality space. And of course, staying in the legal field. So I really had a lot more business perspective. I'm not a software engineer. I'm probably the least technical person on this call, but I know enough about technology to be able to help shape it and move forward. And then I went into the ITIL space in the early part of the 2000s. Again, kind of fell into it by accident. I got jobbed out when I was in leading IT, as many other people have had that experience. And so I was laid off twice in several years, and eventually said I wanted to become a consultant, right? What do you do when you don't want to deal with office politics? You become a consultant, and really fell on ITIL in its early days before it became, much more religious and all of that. Anyhow, fast forward from there. In 2012, I had an opportunity to go to an early DevOps days in California. Somebody that is pretty well known in the space had invited my then business partner and I to come. And coming from the framework space, we just saw something really, really interesting, dynamic, a lot of energy. Gene was writing the Phoenix Project at the time. Gene was the one that had invited us. And we saw something there. We just saw something that was cultural and technical and process kind of all put together. And at the time, there was a lot of debate about whether DevOps would cross to the enterprise. So I'm kind of taking us on a little bit of a DevOps journey here, right? Where there were articles in the Wall Street Journal that like, this is cool, but the enterprise will never be able to scale. And maybe that's a problem today. But we also knew, kind of watching the industry as it did cross over into the enterprise, that communities of practice would be important, and that the human elements of DevOps was going to become essential. That while everybody was focusing, particularly even in CD, on, you know, how can you build your pipeline, it's humans that drive transformation, right? Your humans are going to be the ones that are going to either buy into your vision or not, and are going to really influence how an enterprise moves forward. So we launched DevOps Institute in 2015. And as a member organization, we have certifications, we do events, things like that. So for me, just to kind of sum it up, I really have just, I guess, essentially always been in the right place at the right time. But I would tell you, if I had to pick something that was kind of the key to my career, and I'll talk more about this in a bit, is I've always been curious, right? I've always been curious about technology. I've always wanted to understand the business practices that are associated with it. I always wanted business to see technology less as a cost center and more as an enabler. And of course, looking at it from a cultural perspective, how society has changed because of technology and how business has changed, those that have succeeded and those have failed. So I've always been really fortunate to be curious enough and be surrounded by a lot of mentors who really gave me the support that I needed, even though I wasn't a software engineer, to be able to be a contributor to the space.
Wow, thank you so much, Jane. That's a powerful story. Zainab, can you tell us your DevOps story?
All right. So mine is much shorter because I started my DevOps journey in 2018 when I joined InterSwitch Group. That was actually the first time I heard about CI/CD when I joined InterSwitch. I joined as a backend developer, and at InterSwitch, we had to learn how to use CI/CD tools to manage applications that we build, pushing it from test environment to live and all that. And that was when I got to, or rather had my first experience with DevOps. So I had to learn how to use Jenkins and Spinnaker, tools like that. And it really interested me, but I wasn't really able to go deep because my role basically was just to learn how to use these tools to move my code from one environment to the other, manage code base and all that. But I was really interested in it. I actually wanted to move to the DevOps team, but I didn't have the opportunity at the same time because they needed more backend developers than than DevOps engineers. So I just continued. So in I think August last year, after I started my open source career, the application for Google Season of Docs opened, and wow, this was like an opportunity for me when I saw Jenkins as one of the organizations participating. So this was like an opportunity for me to satisfy this curiosity I had about DevOps and to understand this tool more. So I decided to apply to Jenkins organization, despite the fact that I had basic knowledge of this tool, but I didn't have an in-depth understanding. But I believed that working on the project Jenkins was putting out would give me an opportunity to increase my knowledge, satisfy my curiosity, and probably be like a pathway to starting a career in DevOps, which I've always wanted. And so I applied. I started contributing to Jenkins documentation. I started by migrating existing documentation from Wiki to GitHub. And I wrote proposals to work on Jenkins on Kubernetes. This was really huge. I was scared initially, but I knew I had mentors who were ready to help me, and had colleagues in the office who had always been disturbing outside work hours. So I knew they were also ready to help. So I decided to take on the project, and luckily for me, my proposal was accepted, and I started working on documenting Jenkins on Kubernetes. So working on this project kind of like improved my knowledge. I had more experience. I had more understanding, wrote series of articles on my experience with Jenkins organization about the project, Jenkins on Kubernetes. And yeah, like, well, it has also been like being at the right place at the right time for me also. And my curiosity also has really, really pushed me to lengths that seemed like a bit high, but it has really helped me. Working with Jenkins has really helped me improve my knowledge. And even after the Google Season of Docs program ended, I still continue to contribute to the Jenkins organization because it's an exciting journey for me. And I believe open source, contributing to open source is like one way to improve, is like one of the best ways to improve your skills, get to collaborate with a lot of people, get to know what is happening, what is current in, the tech space and all that. So yeah, that's it for me.
Thank you so much. So today for CDF, for the first quarterly meeting, one of the things that we wanted to do was, invite our panelists who are industry leaders, who have also experience as hiring managers, or who also have experience helping women try to gain skills to move up the corporate ladder, which is why we're having this discussion today on how to level up your DevOps career. So the first question is, what are some of the challenges that women and people of color face in the tech industry during the hiring process? Anyone can start.
I was going to say, you want to pick a starter?
Yeah, Tara, go ahead.
So I did want to call out really quickly. I loved hearing Zenaib, your story, because it sort of proves how we've evolved. It used to be that infrastructure was the thing that people did because they weren't good enough to be application developers. There was definitely a big cultural shift that's happened in the last 20 something years, where now it's actually interesting to work on that stuff. So it makes me very excited to hear that you were motivated to make that kind of change. I think the first important thing to call out is it's a different type of work, and really recognizing, is it the type of work, are you the sort of person who is able to context switch and multitask and likes being in a world that can be highly ambiguous? If you're doing the sort of what we call platform engineering or DevOps engineering, you're solving a problem set that's a mix of people and technology. And as I say, anytime you have a problem that's technical only, that's a really good day. But in this world, that almost never happens, right? Because you're trying to make a technical system to support the people who are going to use it, and who the people are, the type of product they're developing, the type of business that they're in, all of that can impact architectural decisions. So that's a sort of a layer of, some people find very uncomfortable. So it's the first thing to understand is, like, you went through as an Abe about understanding, hey, I actually am really interested about this stuff, want to learn about it, and finding that it's something that's really interesting to you. So I think, taking an opportunity to figure that out first. Is process hackery, which is ultimately what this is, something that you're interested in? And then once you've decided that that is what you're interested in, there are so many different ways that you could approach it. You could approach it from the perspective of really focusing hard on the tools, like becoming a core contributor. Jenkins is a great example of that. Or focusing perhaps to kind of extend the Jenkins model, maybe you develop extensions, right? And so you're actually using Jenkins as your platform in order to enable other functionality. So, but ultimately, the biggest thing is your technical skills are only half the story. Your ability to distill people's thoughts and opinions about the sorts of things that are going to make them more effective, and then turn that into a documentable practice or an implementation is really what's going to make you successful. And the cool thing about this, to me, is that the more you're good at it at sort of the IC level, where you're the platform engineer, the DevOps engineer implementing it, you're actually growing your overall sort of worldview on the process as a whole, which to me really is setting you in line to become a really good leader in the space as far as driving organizational transformation, modernization. So to me, there's a very clear path from, hacking developers to success to having organizational influence. And that's the thing that I would love to see us kind of push on as a concept, because I think there's amazing opportunities there. There are tons of companies now that are now like, hey, they come to the CDF, tell us what we need to do. Well, they actually need people to come in and like work, be employees at their company, be leaders at their company, to tell them that. So all the skills that we can help people develop at the low level will also contribute to this kind of higher level people challenge. Jane can probably speak to this quite a bit with DevOps Institute, I suspect.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right on, Tara. I think that, first of all, we always talked about the glass ceiling, right? That there was this ceiling that, women would bump into. But the truth is, we have ceilings and walls. And we have to break down the walls as well, from an engineering perspective, from a perception perspective, being open to different points of views and different perspectives. In my career, women were the help desk. Women were, you would hire women for training. You would hire, women for like that nurturing role. But, anything that was more engineering or mechanical.
QA was another one.
What?
QA was another one. Would be a lot of women.
Oh yeah, absolutely, right, absolutely. So anything that kind of fell into a very typical stereotype of male and female roles very much was the early days of IT. I'm really happy that organizations are at least considering, investing in, focused on, or at least aware of that diversity and inclusion is more than then how many women can you put on a panel or how many women can you put on your team is kind of tokenism that a lot of organizations are starting to at least open up their team so that they're not trying to fill them with, kind of clones of each other. And I think that's been a big problem. I've been the only one. I've been very fortunate. I've had a lot of really great mentors. I've had a lot of great male mentors, female mentors, but most of the time I was the only woman in leadership in the technology space. And I always felt like I had to prove myself more, maybe because I'm not as technical as some, but there was always like, you had to work harder at it, right? To be accepted by the teams, by your peers, by the leaders, only because it wasn't natural. And I think whether it's women, whether it's people of color, we're starting to break some of those stereotypes in terms of what a team's makeup should be, and even from a perspective or a cultural, recognizing that bringing different points of views, and again, it isn't necessarily male, female, people of color, not people of color. It's really looking at teams from a very holistic and human perspective. And I'd like to think, in my experience now, more than a few years in, that we're not there, but we understand it. The biggest issue I think we have is that we're scaring women and people of color away. So they're not even going to enter the field in the first place because they hear about sexual harassment, they hear about, bias, they hear about all of that. And if I were a young woman thinking about my career, I'm not so sure right now that I would feel really, fascinated by, I would learn Python on my own and, become an ethical hacker or something. So I think we have a long way to go, but I do think that we're at least on the surface, trying to at least bring it to the forefront.
I think you call out something really interesting about the roles. And I was thinking a lot of people have evolved into the DevOps space, originating from systems engineering, for example, which historically has hugely been a very homogenous population. These are the guys mostly who started out working in data centers and punching cable and being able to hack on the network appliances and put in the routing tables, right? Or know how to do database administration or all of those sort of operational things. And it is a very male, historically a very male-oriented role. And so as a lot of those folks have rotated into the DevOps space, they've kind of brought that homogeneousness, whatever that correct word is. But the cool thing to me about DevOps is that it's not just about operations and systems engineering, right? DevOps is Jez Humble describes it as a community of practice, right? And there are so many different ways to look at it. There's the operational aspect. I came into it from, my role back in the Netscape days was a build release engineer, right? So I was doing make systems and writing installers. And then we started developing tools because we didn't have tools to use. We had to write the tools that we used. But you can come into, if you think about Tekton, for example, if you're going to implement a Tekton continuous delivery pipeline, mostly what you have to do is understand how to use YAML, right? And so there's a lot of different skill sets that can apply. I think where it gets interesting is figuring out where, what skill sets do you have now, and where would that fit as they stand? And then from there, which direction would you want to then subsequently learn? And I think that brings up another key part of what makes for a very successful career in this space is that desire, not just the ability to work in ambiguity, but that constant desire to want to be learning new things because it's constantly changing. And so being able to have the initiative to be exploring, investigating, reading lots of people's blogs, like what are you doing over here? Oh, that's a really interesting idea. Could I apply that? That's to me is what's the most fun about these types of roles. And I think it also provides, if you approach it the right way, the greatest number of entry points into those roles, because there's almost always going to be some way that you can enter yourself and then from there work your way out from a technical standpoint.
Very cool. Anything else to add?
I think I've spoken enough.
Well, I think there's just this stereotype and assumption that the tech space is like a male-dominated area and it's for men. I think because for me, that was one of the reasons for starting out late in tech. I studied computer science in university. And I had the opportunity to get right into tech from my university days or immediately after. But I was always scared and I always looked at it like this was something more for men. Because even when we're in school, you see guys holding sessions, holding lessons, and they're just the only ones. There are no females there because they believe that females are not going to be able to take whatever it is they're discussing, or it's probably too advanced or too complex or something like that. So I think that assumption is one of the major drawbacks. I remember myself when someone was asking me a question sometime back then, and I was like, if I get into this space, I'm not going to have time to be able to do anything. If I want to start a family, I'm not going to have time for my family, I'm not going to have time for my kids and things like that, fear like that. But I was lucky to have a push from someone that just started. And when I started, I saw that all these things are just like assumptions, are those things in your head, things that a lot of people have just put around the tech space, like a lot of fear that when you actually get in, you see that there are ways that you can go around this. So I think this is like one major barrier. Then I think another barrier is like the confidence gap. So we have a lot of ladies, a lot of women who are very skilled, who are actually very, very skilled, but not really confident about the things they know and the skills they have, and which has really caused like a huge gap between the male counterparts and the females. So I was reading something sometime back, and I saw that a female engineer with 8 years experience has the same confidence as a male with 0-year experience. Man, that's like a huge gap. Imagine 8 to 0. So these are like some of the major things that I think that has really, really caused the gap we have today and the drawback for women in tech industry.
Yeah, we have a follow-up question from the audience for Zainab. So from your experience, what are some practical things leaders can or should do to help advocate for women of color in the workplace?
So, well, a lot of organizations nowadays are speaking about gender diversity. but they're not actually putting in policies, actual policies in their work environment to actually support this diversity they speak about. But I think some of the things organizations can put in place are things like flexible work arrangements, work-life balance to encourage more women to get into the organization, opportunity for career advancement and progression, because the percentage of women at entry level is very, very much different from the percentage of women we have at top level roles. And this is another reason that kind of stops women from getting in, when you know that if I get in, you're probably going to stop at the stock at an entry level role or a mid-level role. So company needs to put in policies, probably trainings that could help women advance from that entry level role to top level roles in the organization. And one way they can achieve this also is by having women at this top level roles, because statistics have shown that organizations that have women in top level roles, more women in top level roles, tend to have more women across the organization. So even if you're not able, you don't have at the moment, you don't have women that have grown from entry level, you could hire experienced women to fill in roles at top level positions to encourage more women across other levels in the organization. Then yes, excellent training. Another major thing that has kind of hindered women is most times we know women have to take break at some point in their career, probably because they had a kid, you know, or something at one point or the other. Coming back to the work environment after such break is not always easy for them to kind of like fit in from where they left. So it's also important that organizations take into consideration breaks like this and probably put in like trainings that could help these women level up with their counterparts, people who they left, their colleagues who they left at the same level before they took such breaks. So yeah, I think these are just a few things that organizations could put in place.
No, thank you so much. That's great.
And Jackie, can I jump in on something?
Yeah, please.
I think that's really interesting. So despite the fact the pandemic has been just a horrible experience, and we were all talking about that before time, I think some things happen that's very subtle and maybe have a long-term impact. And that's that flexible work environments have become more common out of necessity because we're all working from home. Families, and I don't want to say women, families with children had to really adapt their work. Men, women, didn't matter what your family, how your family is made up of, men, right? But a division of responsibility. I think where usually one member of the family is ultimately responsible for managing the household and children, and maybe that's an antiquated approach. But the pandemic was almost like an equalizer in terms of the work-life balance, in the sense of we needed, first of all, enterprises needed to understand their employees had more challenges that they had to address. Some did it better than others, right? But there were so many Zoom calls where a child would walk in or a dog would walk in, and I took my cats out at the last minute. And so I'm hoping, and maybe it's unrealistic, that looking at flexible work, get the work done as opposed, task versus time, looking at more shared responsibility between partners, looking at the family unit as an important part of the workplace, whether you're a family unit of a single person and a pet or a child or not. But I do think we've had a little bit of a societal shift. Now, whether it goes back or not, I don't know. But I don't know, I kind of feel like we're a little bit more open about, if the child walks in or the pet walks in, or you need to take 3 hours off because your child is homeschooling or whatever. There just seems to be a little bit more acceptance of that than there might have been before the pandemic. I don't know. I'd be really interested in other people's opinion on that.
What I've been seeing is that for the women who are supported in that transition because their work allows for that flexibility, you know, the employer allows for it, and also if they have a partner, that the partner participates, I absolutely agree 100%. I think there's been a lot of really great data that we're now, you know, starting to see the patterns of that. Unfortunately, I think as a whole, we're still seeing that women have, by and large, borne the biggest burden of this transition. More, I mean, way more women are leaving the workforce than are able to statistically than are able to make a go of it. So I think what we're having is kind of sort of the extremes. On the one hand, I think in some ways it's gotten way better. Like some families, some employers have shown that, yes, actually we can be flexible, we can make this work. In other cases, it's gotten worse, and it's unclear kind of, you know, how long it'll take to recover from that. Yeah, I see in the comment, 73% of people leaving the workforce were women. And I think that statistically we'll see that absolutely borne out as the pandemic continues. And so I think if there's an opportunity here, it's to, you know, I would love, if I could, I would say, hey, Nicole Forsgren, you know, you did such a great job with State of DevOps Report. Could you go figure out the equivalent for how to be an employer? Here are all the best practices for how to retain your employees in times of crisis. You know, what remote work and flexible work showed that you can still be successful, and, you know, read a book around that becoming the new model for employees. I think that would be amazing. I'm sure she would rather not do that. That sounds like a really hard project. But I think there are, you know, even if there's not a book written, I think there are lessons to be learned. And if nothing else, I think, you know, as a community, really celebrating and endorsing the employers who have been partners and who will continue to be partners, I think is really important to reinforce that that idea of, like, you can be successful with this type of flexibility, which allows a lot of, you know, majority women, not always, as to Jane's point, there are plenty of male caregivers, but a lot, statistically more women, to continue to be successful in the workforce, because in the end, it's good for the industry to have those people participate, right? We never have enough employees as an industry. We're constantly looking around for anybody who can do these roles. So the more as an industry we invest in making people successful, which frankly comes back around to me, it comes back around to DevOps, which is how do you make your product organization successful? I think there are patterns that can be applied, right? Because DevOps is not just technical. DevOps is technical plus people. So I think if there's a way that we can show that DevOps is not just about, oh, well, if you have continuous integration and automated testing and some kind of automated security checking, you're doing it right, right? It's rather like, how is your organization as a whole the most productive and effective and grows through these models? I think that's, you know, that's where I would love to see us continue to try and help the industry evolve.
Yeah, and just to add one more thing, and I think it's important, and I'm really interested in the international perspective on this as well. The talent market in DevOps the gap is huge, right?
Huge gap.
Right. So we're hoping that we're going to bring in more entry-level people. We're hoping we're going to encourage more women, people of color, to enter into this space. But if organizations, particularly today, don't start to introduce more flexible work environments or adapt to whatever the needs are at home. I was talking to a CIO yesterday. I said, are you going to go back to the office? And he said, no. I mean, right now, our plan is very large enterprise. But at some point, you know, it's a buyer's or a seller's market, right? And at some point, you know, the organizations that are really trying to court talent, this will be something that they will need to focus on. And the great news is the opportunities are tremendous for anyone that's interested in really grooming a career, but with passion and curiosity and innovation, right, as your kind of core skills, because right now the gap is just tremendous. And it's not just for the mythical full stack engineer, right? It's for, you know, all different roles that are very, very hybrid.
Let's talk a little bit about what some of those skills are that will help some of these individuals get hired. From your perspective as hiring managers, what is your recommendation on skills that those core skills folks should have?
I'll start. I'm probably doing the most hiring or most experience hiring in this space. Sort of core things, proficiency in any language. Usually for platform engineering, it's probably going to be something like Python, Perl back in those days, and then Python kind of took over. But I think there's no hard requirement on that, but you need to show some kind of proficiency in the types of in a programming language that is most prevalent in this space. Ideally, you have some kind of engagement with an open source community. So much of this world is based on open source technologies. CloudBees is a commercial company, and there's a variation of Jenkins that CloudBees sells essentially, enterprise licensing support for. But Zainab, the fact that you got in there and involved, like I would look at that and go, yay, that's amazing. An understanding of the role of automation and some experience in having written some type of automated test. Like if you come in to me and the difference between a unit test and a system test, that is very interesting to me. You may not be an expert at them, but even knowing that there's a difference is a pretty critical part of building a pipeline. And then, and again, this would be an ideal candidate, and someone who's got some sort of understanding of security policy in operational space. As we get into the cloud, like understanding some sort of basic best practices around system architectures. Part of the role, I think, of the most successful folks who are in this space is being able to ultimately become an advisor to the product development engineers on best practices. Like if in the old days, you would write a monolithic application. Let's say it's Java, it's sitting on top of Tomcat or WebSphere, and you probably got some ginormous Oracle cluster sitting behind it for your data store. And it's sitting in a data center, and your security is the firewall, right? And it's, very simplistic. In the cloud, you probably want to be talking about microservices, or at least micro-esque services. You certainly need to understand networking and security policies, because it is no longer an on-premise thing. There's no firewall to hide behind. So, and firewalls, frankly, have hidden a lot of sins from that perspective. Again, you don't necessarily have to be an expert in all of those things, but to have, it's kind of a breadth first thing. You should have a decent knowledge of all of these areas, and then be able to go deep in one spot. Because then that tells me that, one, you have the interest and motivation to develop sort of those high level skills, and the fact that you have depth in one of them means that you have the ability to create that depth. So I could see you as someone who has potential to then create depth in other areas as are needed, right? So for me, it's all about hiring the potential. I want to see that, someone who's basically smart and motivated is the number one thing I look for. And then those are, what I talked about are some of the signals that would tell me that that's true. Or you've been doing this for 1 million years and you've got like 9 companies that you took to market on your platform. That's also good. But I like looking for people who are newer and that, and help them to grow their career. Because to me, that as a manager, that's like the most fun part of it.
Very cool. Jane?
So I absolutely agree. And it's funny because what you're describing, Tara, is the old T-shape, right? We need T-shaped people who have a deep competency, but also have a broad range of knowledge, maybe even experience in security, in testing. If you're an ops person, you have some experience with Python. But these days, if you're a developer, you need to understand the entire gamut, right? Write it, build it, secure it, deploy it, and all of that. So you need to be able. You need to be able to do that. See, this is what I'm talking about, home things, right? It's like, hey, no. So
I'm going to use that now.
I know, right? But anyhow, so yeah, we call it T-shaping, but I think there's something else too. When I hire people, I look for, and I know it sounds like a little wonky, but I look for the light in their eyes, right? And like you, Tara, and I'm really interested in hearing from Zainab about this as well, is that, you went out there and said, I want to learn this. I want to do this. Give me the experience for it. There's an accountability and ownership of your own career, right? And I will help anybody that is really passionate about being inquisitive, curious, shadows other people, that is responsible for their own work. And yes, they have to have some experience, but you also have to be a good human, right? Because, teams are built up of humans, and you could be, there was an old thing years ago, I don't know if it's myth or truth, that in one company's employee handbook, you couldn't be a a-hole and work there because they didn't care how technical you were. If you were going to be a jerk, I'll use the word jerk. If you were going to be a jerk, then they didn't want you on the team, because no matter how smart you were or how capable you were not going to be a good fit. And so I do think there's this kind of people process automation aspect to a hybrid human that we need to nurture, right? You can teach somebody Python.
The soft skills with the technical.
Exactly. And we don't even call them soft anymore, Jackie, because they're hard. So we call them human skills. No, and the whole market calls them soft, and it's like, really? They're not so soft. They're pretty hard.
Those are the hardest problems.
That's true.
Yeah. I mean, as a manager, sometimes don't you just deal with all the drama, right? Drama in your team is the biggest productivity suck of all. So yeah, I think you have to be a good human too.
Yeah, I think communication skills are absolutely critical, written and verbal, because again, you're solving a people process issue. The other thing that's really important, and I cannot emphasize this enough, is that it's a two-way street when you're looking at a job. It's not just about you selling yourself as a good candidate. The company has to sell themselves as a good employer. And so I think another really key skill to develop, whether it's DevOps or application development or whatever, is understanding what's the type of environment that you need to succeed, right? And so when you go into an interview, any good interview worth their salt is going to say, do you have any questions for me? When I interview, I expect you to ask me questions, because I want you to be thinking about what sort of environment am I about to be stepping into potentially, and is this something that's going to work for me? And so I think it's really important. And there are a lot of people, the industry is not perfect and not even close, but I think there's enough people now and enough organizations that are trying to do the right thing. And everybody needs employees. And so, trying to be very thoughtful about how you evaluate whether or not that's going to be a place where you can succeed should be a very important part of your process. And that's something there's not a hard, it's so sort of specific to you. There's not like a really good set of rules that you can follow, but it's definitely something that I encourage everyone to think about a lot. So that's another reason why, getting involved with open source communities can be so powerful, or general communities. Like, you don't have to be a coding contributor, but these larger communities, because it's networking. Right? Oh God, I love where I work. Oh, why do you love it? Right? Oh, are you hiring? These are very important things to get used to doing. And I think a very important part of this process that is undervalued, generally speaking. So it's not just about your resume. It's about where do you want to go in the future, and what do you need to get there?
Yeah, and I would almost ask Zainab a question. How did you, what argument did you use to be able to say, this is what I want to do and give me a chance? Sorry, Jackie, I'm playing moderator now.
No, I'm okay with that. You're very good at it.
Zainab, did you hear my question? Yeah, how did you convince?
Sorry, I didn't get that.
Oh, what argument did you use? How did you convince either the team or the manager or your organization to give you that chance?
Okay, so the first thing is, so let me explain how Google Season of Dogs works. When you're applying for Google Season of Dogs, you have the opportunity to explore different open source organizations and submit a proposal to work with those organizations. So it's not compulsory that you contribute to those organizations during the application process. Some people choose just to submit their proposal with their experiences and wait till they get accepted before they start contributing to the organization. But because I knew that what I was going into was not something that I had so much experience with. And I wanted to like have the opportunity to get more experience. I decided to start contributing to Jenkins organization immediately, like to try and improve my experience and try and improve my chances of getting accepted. Because I believe like one of the best ways you can convince them is by actually showing them what you can do, you know, and how far you're willing to go. So that was what I just did. I started contributing to Jenkins, and during that phase before I got accepted, I was able to migrate and work on about seven documentation pages for Jenkins. And this had nothing to do with Jenkins on Kubernetes, which was the proposal I was working on, but at least I had an idea of how Jenkins works and some tools and some processes in Jenkins while migrating these pages, because I had to like update content on the pages, and the mentors were also ready to put me through and correct me where I made mistakes. And so I think that was the major thing that improved my chances of getting selected, because I had the opportunity. Our proposals were open. We're required to we're asked to submit our proposals so the whole community could review. So I had the opportunity to see other people's proposal. And I saw that there were actually people who were applying to Jenkins that were more experienced than I was in Jenkins on Kubernetes. There was actually someone that has written so many articles on it. But I think the fact that I was already working with the mentors, I was already working with the community, and I was able to show them how interested I was in this. I think, so that was what really helped me to get into that space.
But you took accountability for that. See, that's what I love, right? You didn't wait for somebody to hand it to you. You took it upon yourself to be able to do what was necessary, or at least to showcase yourself differently. And I think that's really important. Tara, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was going to agree. It's you know, whether or not you're a student or new to the industry and trying to build up a CV, or you already have a job but are trying to expand your experience. That's exactly the kind of signal I look for, someone who has that motivation, that curiosity. And I think I want to call out something you spent, you worked on documentation. Like, that is a completely legit thing. And in fact, documentation is one of those things where there's never enough contributors in open source projects. Usually, when I was the project owner for Bugzilla back in the day, a million years ago, documentation and testing were the first contributors I got, because they were excited to be part of a project. They didn't know how to code yet. But that was a way that they could contribute, and it led to other things. I actually had a kid who was in 8th grade who was my first Bugzilla QA tester. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, go play Nintendo or something. Like, he's a great kid. And so I think it's important. You don't have to feel like there's some bar you have to achieve in order to contribute in some way, right? Any contribution that you do at any level can be considered a legit first step, and you just have to be willing to take it.
Yeah, so actually that's one of the things I actually tell people. I've had a lot of people reach out to me that I want to apply for Outreachy, I want to apply for Google Season of Docs, but I don't have any experience. And I tell them,
do it anyway.
Go ahead, do it, start. Like, I got accepted to Outreachy internships before Google Season of Docs. And when I submitted my application to Outreachy also, I had not contributed to open source before. Like, I hadn't done it before, but I just decided, as always, to just take that leap of faith. Like, what's the worst that could happen? You won't get accepted. But then again, you would have gained some form of experience in doing that. So that's the same thing I always tell people who reach out to me. Even if you don't have the experience, you've not started, this is probably the opportunity you've been waiting for to actually start. So just do it. So yeah.
I was going to say, you said something before about confidence, and circling back to women and people of color, we have to be better at instilling confidence, right? Confidence that you can try anything, right? You can try anything. I mean, we're so lucky to be in the tech space, really. Where else do you have a job that requires you to learn something new every single day, right? To be curious, to be innovative, right? That you're not sitting and doing the same thing day over day over day. The way technology is evolving, it's going very, very quickly. And I think as an industry, we have to, and I don't know how, I mean, I think that's something interesting to look at. How do we instill that kind of confidence in maybe an underserved part of our population that really could be amazing contributors to the tech space, but don't have the confidence or to be able to take that first step, because that first step is really hard. And I know there's some really great initiatives, but we have to be better at that.
Yeah, or even like, I appreciate what you're saying 100%. I will call a niggly on the term. Like, I think a lot of people like developing that like the confidence aspect of it may never happen. I will admit freely, I have been working in tech industry since 1994, 93. I'm so old, I can't remember. It was like last November.
I was actually before I was born.
But, I am a senior engineering manager at Google. Like, in theory, that should make me feel like a confident person, but I'm not. Like, every day I'm like, okay, another day of faking it. Like, I know what I'm talking about. And the reality is, in many ways, I do know what I'm talking about. I didn't get the job at Google because someone had took pity upon me. I do know what I'm doing, but that idea that of contentment that, oh yeah, I'm good. No, I constantly am sort of stressing about it just because that's my personality. And I think a lot of women struggle with this.
So, Tara,
I think it's letting yourself be okay in that uncertainty. Richard Branson who's one of my heroes because he's crazy and he shares a lot of what I do as far as employee relations. He said, you don't think you have the skills to take the job, take it anyway and figure it out. Right. A lot of guys sort of innately socially are much more comfortable with that idea. Women are not socialized, generally speaking, to be comfortable with that idea, which is why I think, is it Zainab that we were saying, like, or one of you was saying, like, a 6-year senior engineer has the same confidence as a brand new engineer. Like, that's just kind of built into us. And so it's giving ourselves permission to ignore that voice in the back of our head and do it anyway. But it never stops. And I think that's the other thing that's really important is, as women, or guys who struggle with this, like whoever has this type of struggle, like, we need to make sure that we foster a community that will be louder than our subconscious in order to enable us to continue going. So, like, I love that Jackie has founded CDF. It's like, here's a new community where we can encourage each other and remind ourselves, actually, we are smart and we are capable and we can continue to figure this out. And we just, like I said, I've been doing this for over 20 years. I still need those reminders. And I think that's okay. And if you are new to this, be okay with knowing that that might be the case. It's all right. You're not alone.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think this is why it was so important to create CDF. And it's not, CDF was initially easy because I'm like, I identify as a woman. But I think as a Latina in tech and as a woman, I was like always looking around. And again, like Jane said, I usually was the youngest or the only female. And I'm like, for me, I thought it was just as simple as just starting to make the space. If you start to make the space for whether it's women or genderqueer or whoever it is that is underrepresented in the tech community, it just helps because it's an outlet. It's saying, like, sharing your experience and knowing that you're not alone a lot of the time. And just like going back to having a nurturing and safe environment where you're lifting each other up, or you're meeting people who are going to help you gain skills, or who are just going to be there to support you and remind you, like, yeah, just apply for the job and fake it till you make it. Thank you so much. This has been such a great discussion. I just want to do a quick time check. We've got 25 minutes till the end.
And Jackie, unfortunately, I need to jump off in about 4 minutes. So
yep, no problem. No problem. This is, I wanted to open this. We were going to do breakout sessions, but instead I think we'll just open it up for a floor discussion. Tara, Jane, if you have to go, no worries. We'll continue the conversation with the speakers because we do want to.
I can stick around for a little while longer. So.
Cool. Because we do have some additional questions actually for the rest of the attendees. And thank you. Like, this has just been it's nice to just be around other smart, brilliant, females, because it's just like gives me hope for myself.
Yeah, it gives
they're
me
not going to
hope
be a
too.
deadbeat.
Imagine hearing Tara said that as a senior engineer at Google, she still has to battle with the fact that
I know. I wanted to tell her, you need to have the
so
confidence of a male at 0 skills. It's important. I mean, it makes you, also analyze gender roles, cultural backgrounds, how we've been raised. I was always told to be nice. Not that I'm not nice, but I'm more of a edgy, spunky person that will a lot of the times tell you how it is. And my friends joke, they were like, imagine if you were a male right now, you'd probably be a VP somewhere. And that sucks sometimes to hear that, because you're just like, what else is holding me back as a female, right? Is it the gender role of how I was raised to be a nice girl, to ask for permission?
Or the think like a man, and
I don't want to think like a man. They're gross.
Why do I have to think like a man?
Really, it's like, oh, well, maybe you should think like a man. No, but there are times that little inner voice, to Tara's point, is niggling at me going, hey, if you were a man, you wouldn't put up with that stuff. Right? If you were, if you were, whatever, and you're right, there is always that little voice that is going, oh, you're not the same. But on the other hand, I'm pretty proud of, and I'm probably closer, I'm not at the end of my career, but I'm at the other end than some of the people in this space. I think not listening to that voice, because I'm not a man, right? I'm not a man. And I don't think I should have to act like one, right? I think I should act like Jane. I don't think I should act like a woman, right? Or, somebody that I do identify as a woman, but I don't think I have to act like a woman either. What does that mean, right? What does that mean? And so that's part of, I think, what we have to break down. And it's not going to be my generation, right? I mean, I think my generation is trying to set the stage. We were supposed to be the coolest generation on the planet. We're the Woodstock gen. Well, I was pretty young. Let me be fair. Okay, I wasn't at Woodstock, and I was very, very, very young. But that we were supposed to change the world, and unfortunately, we did not live up to our potential on that. So we have to really set the stage for the next ones. I do apologize because I do have to drop off, but it's really been a pleasure. And I want to tell you one thing, just as a parting thing. You know what I loved about today's panel? We did not man bash. I've been on a lot of these panels where you just feel this need to like rise up and then really like push others down. I really loved this conversation. I thought it was very healthy. Of course, I don't know everybody, but I've met some of you. So really, thank you for this. Jackie, particularly, Tracy, Zainab, and Tara, really, it's just been a really nice opportunity to share. So I appreciate that. But I do need to.
Thank you so much.
Apologies.
Thanks so much, Jane.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, so we had a few breakout session questions prepared for folks. We won't do the breakout. We'll just ask folks to come off mute. I think one of the first questions was, what stage of your career are you in? So I'll start with Shandani.
Hi, everybody. This is Chandni. I am, on papers, I am 7 years of experience, but I have started my open source career last year with Tecton when I was selected as Outreachy mentee. And,
nice. Oh yeah, I was like, yeah, name is familiar. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and although Christy has left the call, but she has been amazing mentor, and she has been very helpful till now. Even I am done with Outreachy, but still I'm continuing the contribution, although it's pretty slow compared to the experience on papers. But yeah, I'm still in the journey, and really thank you very much for creating this community, Jackie. This is what we need at this moment, probably. And thank you, Tara. Thank you, Janab, and of course, Jane, for giving your journey. This is probably we could relate every bit of words, whatever you spoke. So it's really difficult sometimes. As you said, Tara, and it the moment you said, okay, I still feel under confident at this level of my career. It gives me a little bit hope for sure. Yeah,
So
it gives me hope. Yeah,
yeah,
thank you.
no, thank you. But like my follow-up question is, what do you think you need to help you propel your career to the next stage?
I think I am a little bit of introvert kind of person, or maybe I need to open up a bit. I am I'm talking on behalf of people who are scared to put up question openly in the forum. So I always have this fear of asking questions publicly, assuming what people might assume about me with having so much years of experience and I have no clarity of what I'm doing. So that rather than that, I prefer to go one-to-one and ask questions, which might not be correct way, of course, which might be disturbing for many people. So I'm slowly learning, but I think probably if community gives such kind of sessions where people with so much years of experience can come up and say that this is okay to ask, this is fine, you are not going to be judged on anything. Even though you ask a question, what is open source, people are ready to explain you there. Maybe that might improve the way people approach. So yeah, I have understood this now probably, but yeah, probably there are so many people who might not be aware of this fact. So there are still many of my friends or relatives who are still new to the tech. They are really not sure what to do in the open source communities. So they just they're wandering around what could be the best approach to reach out to people. So yeah, probably if there is a guideline or something which can explain what new contributors can do to clarify everything, I think that would be really helpful for newcomers.
Thank you so much for your feedback. Tara or Tracy, do you have any tips or help that you can lend to Shadni?
Yeah, I do it. I've been talking a lot. Tracy, did you want to start?
No, I think that's great. I think thanks for sharing. I get the question thing. I think there's so many times like I've had to learn to get better at speaking publicly. Like I did Toastmasters for years and even asking questions in front of big groups. There's one conference where there was a lady who asked a question and she was just asking total questions and she was my hero because it didn't matter what the question was. She just kind of asked it and it was like an IoT question and an IoT conference. And at one point she was just like, why don't we 3D print food? And I thought every time I feel nervous about asking a question, I just think like that lady asked that question in front of everyone, like with no fear. And it's just like, I gotta embody that. So just having some kind of mental picture. And yeah, I think I love how Tara opened up, but I think that's super important to remember. We're all in the same boat. So yeah, let's just cheer each other on.
Yeah, or ladies from the rest of the panel or group, do you have any recommendations on kind of how to get over that anxiety and fear?
I think there's Sam, go ahead.
So, well, for me, I'll say a battle I can really, really relate to what you're saying. And I still face the same thing till date. Like there are times when I go to my social media page and I see something and I want to type, and I've actually finished typing what I said. And at the end of the day, I just clear everything and I just close it because I feel like what will people say, or I want to ask questions and I've typed it already. And at the end of the day, I just have to clear the message because I feel like, what would they say if I send this message? So, but one thing I know is it's not something that you can get over immediately.
No.
It's not something that just goes away. You just have to consciously work on it. And with time, it just gets better. I don't know if there's ever a time when it's going to completely go away, when you're not going to be scared. But I know that as time goes on, like you now, you've been able to get into the open source space. And I know that as time goes on, you get more confident when you see how the kind of questions people are asking. You see that even when some people tend to ask questions that you feel like, what kind of question is this? And someone will still answer without
That's very
asking
true.
what kind of question. You see so many scenarios like that. And when you say it, it tends to kind of boost your confidence a bit, that if this person can do this, just like Tracy mentioned, if this person can do this, then why not? And the truth is, at the end of the day, you just think that, okay, what's the worst that can happen? You get, if I do this. And most times when you think of the worst possible scenario, it's not actually really harmful. So you just take that leap of faith, or you just, take that step. So that's just it. Then also, it also helps to have like people also that you can look up to, because another thing that has really really helped me is I have ladies, a lot of ladies that I look up to, and I see the way they post their minds without any sort of reservation. I see the way they make comments and all that on social media. And not everybody, the truth is, I think one of the major thing that causes this fear is the fact that you want everybody to like you or everybody to be comfortable with what you do. But the truth is, at the end of the day, it's not possible. Even when you're doing the right thing, there are still people that will think that what you're doing is wrong. So once you understand that, you just go ahead. So when you have people also that you look up to, so when I'm in a kind of situation or when I want to do, I just think, what would this person do, or what would this person say? And I just try to let that guide me also. So yeah.
Yeah, it is. Confidence is a practice. You have to practice kind of jumping off that cliff over and over until one day you're jumping off without thinking about it.
I have one thing to add there.
Yeah, Gail,
I
go for it.
completely agree with everything everyone has said. It doesn't happen in one day. It takes practice, and it will kind of always be there. You just learn to ignore it, really. So I completely agree with everything everyone has said. I have one kind of practical, tactical tip for you that might help you, and you can take it or leave it. And that's around finding like a trusted partner, a trusted person to practice with. So yes, the like stuff like Toastmasters, but if there's something like, I remember learning how to speak up in meetings, or learning how to have a conversation, or learning how to do public talks. It's around having a trusted partner that you can kind of practice with sometimes. Someone who can give you, that you feel supported with, or even if they can be there with you. So I'm sure, you heard Jane talk about this earlier, mentors are a really big help. And I find that women and people of color are not encouraged to find mentors as much. It doesn't happen naturally as much. You see in the community, men often take another man under their wing and teach them and carry them with them. Women have to be a little more proactive and say like, hey, will you be my mentor? Will you teach me? Will you help me? So I would just encourage you to find someone, whether it's someone you work with, someone on this call, someone you can kind of professionally lean on. I'm sure everyone here today would be happy to talk to you if you have something where like, hey, I need to like just dry run, just practice this thing, just to give you not even feedback, just that boost of confidence, right? So I would just say like, look for a partner, a trusted partner, or a mentor to really practice that with, on top of everything everyone else said. That's very, very true.
It's a lot of work, because it's also shifting your perspective to learning, for example, how to take criticism, how to take constructive criticism. Because once you learn how to do that, then you'll ask that question and you won't care what people think, because you've already used to feedback, whether it's good or negative, right? So I think that's also one thing that I would recommend is, ask for feedback. I used to be really afraid of asking for feedback because that meant that they were going to tell me everything I was doing wrong, but that's a huge opportunity. Everything that you're doing wrong is an opportunity to go and learn and improve. But confidence is really hard. It's something that you build over time as your person grows, and as you gain more knowledge. Okay, let's move on. Jared, hi. I don't think I've ever met.
I don't, yeah, we haven't met.
Please introduce yourself.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Jerop. I'm a software engineer working for Google, contributing to Tecton project. Mostly contributing across the board, but mostly to Tecton pipelines. And what was the second question?
Yeah. What are some of the challenges, for example, that you faced in leveling up your career?
Okay. I don't know if I could call this a challenge or something that I'm currently actively, or two things I'm actively thinking about is how, one, I can put out more content like about my work and the contributions I'm making to inspire more people to do the same thing, and while at the same time like building my name and my brand in the field. And a second part to that, which is probably not a challenge I'm facing, but like it's something I'm thinking actively about. I'm a Tecton Pipelines owner, and in our pipelines meetings, I noticed that it's mostly myself, Christy, and Preeti who are actively involved, and like the other people are just men. And I was just wondering, like, what are things that other maintainers or other owners of other projects have done to encourage more contributions or more diverse contributions into the projects that they're maintaining. And I would appreciate to hear some thoughts or experiences that people have around that.
No, that's great. Anyone want to take it?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So one of the things that as a women statistically we tend not to do is like submit for conference talks or do other types of outreach. It's I didn't start doing it until about 5-6 years ago. And a little quick pitch. I'm also on the board of directors for an organization called Women Who Code. And they do a women-oriented conference series all around the world. And so that's a great opportunity. They are always looking for women who want to do technical talks. And so it's really about having some kind of marketing outreach, right? And what you're selling is contributorship. And so it's just figuring out, and Christy's really good at it. She's actually really well known and a fantastic speaker, but anybody can do it. And it's really the best way to kind of build your reputation. And the other way is blogging. And figuring out how to do, and this is always a challenge, how to do it successfully and safely, how to have a curated social media presence, and try and find the right hashtags to link to. It's a very intentional practice, but it's a great way to, and really the only good way to kind of build up a reputation so that people become interested in what you're doing. So, but I wish you luck, and happy to chat more on this offline if you like.
Yeah, I'd really like to talk about that. I'm really interested in like blogging and doing all that, but it feels a bit intimidating, or like it's hard to figure out where to get started to do that.
So I'm so excited that you brought this up because, the CD Foundation has multiple channels where you can take advantage and start building your brand and start also writing or, producing content that is technical. So reach out to me because we have the podcast where you could be a guest and you can come and talk to us about being a maintainer for Tecton. We've never had anybody come talk to us about being a maintainer on Tecton. We have a blog channel. We have a monthly newsletter that you can submit articles to. And we also have CDCon, which I was like, this is a great transition. This is our second virtual event that we're hosting in June. And this is, one of the things that we did last year very intentionally was we went out and curated content from women and people of color, because when we looked at all of our submissions, it was a ton of white men basically who had submitted. And we realized that was just not that's not, you know, we needed to make the space for women and for people of color to also come in and share their knowledge. So the CFP is open right now. I encourage you to submit a talk around Tecton, because
Yeah, and I did love your talk from last year's one. That was really
Thank
good.
yeah,
you.
like, because I haven't seen any Tecton submissions, you know, so far. So yeah, that's one way. Please reach out to me. Like I said, we have several channels that you can start submitting content to, and we'll help with that.
Yeah, no, I'll just add to what Jackie's saying. If anyone is thinking about submitting a talk or wants someone to look at an abstract or give them some input to kind of unblock creativity, just please feel free to hit me up. And just, even if it's like, I think this is an idea, but do people want to hear about it, or I'm not sure, just, you know, any starting point, happy to help you kind of develop that abstract or focus.
Yeah. All right, Tiffany. Hi. Same question to you. Introduce yourself and then share what you think is right now a blocker to leveling up your career.
Yeah, well, hi everyone. My name is Tiffany Jaksha. Some of you know me. I'm a technical evangelist, so I work in developer relations at a startup called Harness, and we're a CI/CD platform. So you know, very much in the space. I guess one of the things that's like been an interesting problem that I never had before was just a lot of work-life balance, because this was like over the past year, this was like the first time I was working at a startup, and I'm like typically the type of person to just like go on everything, but that really backfired on me like this past year, and so I've just been trying to take things slow, but um along the way too, like I had other opportunities to kind of step forward into like a community manager role and just more like leadership roles, um but I really didn't think that it was the right time and the right move for me. So I guess like the biggest thing, I guess the biggest challenge lately has just been trying to figure out what I actually want out of my career. I've gotten to the point where, you know, I put myself out there, like many of you, I'm an introvert. So I spent the majority of my life like not really being the person to raise my hand or speak up in a room, but like I really worked on that. That was like something that I focused on for the past like year and a half, just, you know, signing up for talks, being someone who speaks up in meetings. And I'm really proud of myself for where I've come to the point. But I think like now I don't really know how to set new goals for myself and figure out like what exactly do I want out of my career.
Yeah, I'm going to take that one, Tiffany, because I think that's the hardest thing. Like I've always found if I knew what I wanted in my career, it was relatively straightforward to kind of make a path. I'd be like, okay, this is what I want. Who's doing it? Who do I need to go see? What do I need to learn? And you could make a plan. But if you don't know, it's really challenging. And I do think you have to give yourself time and space. Like I had a big, when I was going, let's say from more technical, from direct programming to then, you know, considering being like a community manager in open source, for me, I remember that being kind of a big shift and having to ask myself all these questions like, oh, is that a bad thing to stop being technical? You know, should I be kind of staying involved with coding and or an architect or a product owner or something like that? And, you know, just fearing like as soon as you step into these leadership roles or something like community manager that, you know, you get treated differently or people stop seeing you as technical completely, which does happen as it turns out. Like I can't tell you how many times as a community manager I get treated like, you know, like you're in marketing, which, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. But it's kind of the instant assumption that that's you're more focused on kind of producing content and you don't understand code and thing. But I think ultimately, yeah, like I think it's worth this maybe a lot of emphasis on staying technical, which is not right for everybody. And I think like I'm much happier having this broader view, getting into leadership, and that's much more suitable for me than kind of saying deeply technical on one topic, which I think would just bore me too much after a while. So yeah, I don't think I have that much practical advice other than saying just hear other people's stories, and it will take time to figure out what's right.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is to give yourself permission to consider anything experimental, right? It's not like any choice that you make has to be the one that you stick with. Like you're on a current path, you try something else, you could always go back to something that you realized in retrospect was actually more interesting to you, and that's actually okay. Google is really notorious for people who are like, oh, I'm going to go do the management thing. That feels like the natural progression, and then they become a manager. Like, this is the most terrible job ever. Why did I want to do this? And that happens all the way up to like VP level. They're like, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. And they go back to being an IC. You know, for me, it was the other way around. I was a frontline manager for most of my career, which meant I was doing a mix with people, but still had my hands in the code. And I didn't want to let that go. And then I finally realized, actually, I don't really care about doing the tech anymore. Now it's really only about the management. But there is no, I think the most important thing is don't feel like there's pressure for you to make a choice and have to get it right. Like the worst case scenario is you spend a year doing something that's like, this wasn't what I wanted to do. And then you can think about, all right, well, what's the next thing I want to try? Right. And that's a perfectly fine thing to do. And it can be a really interesting thing to see on a resume. And then you talk about it in the interview. It's like, oh, you tried different things. Awesome. Good signal.
I agree with these two a lot. Like, I've been in tech for 14 years now, and I've been mostly for the past 10 years operations, and I have been a frontline tech. I've been a frontline manager. I've worked mergers and acquisitions with executives. I've done IT security implementations. I kind of the whole broad scope, and I completely agree. It's about trying new things, and if you don't like it, try something new. It helps a lot if you're in I was in a large corporation for a while, so I could jump around in roles to try new things. For a time in my career, I was really fixated on a title and a career path. And then I realized it didn't serve me anymore, which can happen. You can say, this is my goal, this is what I want. And then it was the next step. And I was like, actually, I don't want that at all. I've been working towards this for 8 years, and I have zero interest in doing that now that it's like in front of me. So I think it's okay to change your mind. So for right now, where I am in my career, like I'm a senior IC, and I'm really happy being a senior individual contributor. I've managed 17 sysadmins at one point, and that was okay, and it was fun for a while, but there's also a lot of things I didn't like about it. So I think it's okay to change your mind at different times, and to not have this like written in stone plan. For me, I don't plan anymore because every time I had a plan, it didn't work out for me. But now it's just a matter of maybe seeing a step in front of me or 2 steps ahead. Even if that thing changes, at least I'm still growing and learning and moving forward, as long as I'm not sitting still, right? So something like that can be helpful.
Well, just a quick time check. It's 12:34. But thank you. This has been so much fun to have this conversation with everyone. And Tiffany, I think from my perspective, I've never been technical. I've always been on the marketing side. But I think for me, I'm super goal oriented, and I'm the type that at the beginning of the year, I write out goals that I want to accomplish throughout the year. What I've noticed in the trend is that as I experience life throughout the year, things just shift, and it's getting used to that change, and being okay with it, and just being okay with it. I think like work-life balance. I tell people to learn from my lesson. I overworked myself in my previous job to the point where I had to take 3 months of medical leave off. Don't let yourself get to that point. It's not worth it. I love my job, don't get me wrong, but it's not worth sacrificing your mental health. So I think that's always something to take into consideration, is always take care of yourself first. The company is going to keep running. It doesn't matter if you invest your 8 hours a day like you're supposed to versus your 12 or 14 hours that sometimes all of us work and we're all guilty of. But Oh, you don't do that, Tara.
I'm officially discouraging you from doing that. It's not healthy.
I'm not saying you should. I'm just saying that it has some real consequences. And
Yeah.
like I said, for me, I had to step away from work for 3 months because I ended up very depressed with really bad anxiety, and it's not worth it.
Yeah.
So thank you again to everyone. This was so much fun, and I can't wait till next quarter to host another one of these.
Awesome. Looking forward to seeing everyone.
Thank
Thanks,
you
Jackie.
so
Great
much.
job. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.